Hello, welcome to my educational autoethnography. We're going to organize it thusly, where we're going to talk about who am I, what is my experience, and what I think an ideal education looks like. Just as a little brief intro to see a little bit of my journey, on my one side over here, we have a little gif of me from 2017 and me wearing the same outfit again here in 2025. It's been a long road, and just a little bit of a reminder that I don't actually seem to have a lot of pictures of myself. Or at least not a lot from the same year. Anywho, let's move on to the next slide. So, first things first, who am I? I am a Dutch, Irish, Mexican American, although some members of my family do identify as Chicano, or Chicana. Most of this stems from my parents' lineages, which are kind of long and kind of complicated. I usually tend to lean more towards my Irish and Mexican American heritage, mainly because I grew up spending a lot of time with my dad, and unfortunately, most of my mom's side of the family. My dad is isolated from his side of the family because they're all out there in Michigan, or Indiana, Ohio, and a lot of that part of the states. So, for the most part, my mom's family is centralized here. They're primarily Mexican immigrants, but in the case of my mom's side, my grandmother had married and remarried several times, to the point to where my mom does not actually know who her father is. And from interviews with my grandmother, all we know about him is that he has some Dutch ancestry and some Native American ancestry. From what I'm told, ties to the Yurok tribe, which are based somewhere in Northern California, near the Yurok River. Anywho, I'm the eldest of three. I have two younger siblings, and that has usually shaped my perspective quite a bit. A lot of the things I do mainly because I tried to be a better example for my younger siblings, even though, in hindsight, that ended up not really going anywhere, and they actually did quite a few things in spite of everything I've done to try to be different from me. So that actually ended up working to my detriment. I consider myself a working class Marxist. I live paycheck to paycheck like a large portion of Americans, and it has led to me being really tied into socioeconomic policy, and it leaves me to be really politically active. Not the most apt comparison, but I believe Taylor Swift also identifies this way, but I'm not a huge fan of hers. But hey, I appreciate her giving the shout out to the Marxists. I am a future educator. I'm an SSTP major, and that has more or less defined my career path for the last 2.5 years. I plan on teaching at continuation school, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit later in a future slide. So, what is my experience in the educational system? I actually have a very unique and a very well spread out experience both in the school system and outside of the school system. So let's talk a little bit about my preschool system, and I know that there's a preschool one down there on the slides, but we're going to ignore that for a minute. Before school, I was actually self-taught quite a bit. I was taught to read and write before the age of 1, and I always constantly hear stories from family members about how we would ride in my mom's Corvette, and I would constantly be pointing at billboards on the street and say, hey, what is that? And then they would tell me, and then from that, I would eventually learn to read, in combination with having stories read aloud to me while sitting in the lap following along with my finger. So I have always taken a great interest in reading, writing less so, but it's caused me to be somewhat of a smart kid that actually really enjoyed education, and is probably one of the reasons why I ended up sticking through with it this long. And just to give you an idea of how long this is, there's another slide of this. We're going to keep going. So, after that, at a really young age, I was shoved into Little Lamb's Preschool, which is a Catholic preschool, and it is in the private school sector. I believe they do actually have a chapter here in San Jose. When I was looking up them doing research for this, apparently they do have a chapter here in San Jose. I don't know if it's still active, but their website is still up. Coupled with my experience in education, we ended up moving a lot, and that's going to be a trend that you're going to see through here. So we moved from San Leandro, where I was attending Little Lamb's Preschool. After graduating there, we would end up moving to Tracy, because we were able to get a large house out there to house the 2 new siblings that I obtained. And I was put in the Poet Christian K through 5 school. It does say K to 3 on the slides, and we'll get to that. But I was here for the kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and half of my 3rd grade education. And this is a Christian private school. It's based out in Tracy. It is still there today, and I actually still contact my teacher, Miss Peretti, every so often. Her birthday is the 26th of January. And, anywho, she's one of those teachers that's actually gone out of her way to keep all of her students motivated. I even have a fun story that I remember, where when I was starting to fall behind, and other such students were falling behind, she would find incentives or gifts, or reach out to those students to personally see what she could do to help them along the way. And this is something that I would not see that often throughout my scholastic career moving onward. Because halfway through my 3rd grade year, our family, which was a dual income family at this point, was no longer able to really afford to stay in this area due to gentrification, which caused us to move to Pleasanton, where I would now be attending public school for the first time at Donlin Elementary, where I would finish up my 3rd grade year with Mr. Dan Horwitz and go all the way till 5th grade. However, this is a key part of my educational experience where some out-of-school influences start to happen again. This is where my parents would start to divorce, which would begin with them moving out of each other's homes, and then I would have to spend 3 days with one and 4 days with the other. And it really caused me to start falling behind in school. And one of the big cruxes that ended up happening here is my mom and dad ended up disagreeing on whether or not I should get held back in 5th grade, because I was put into the school system a little bit earlier. They wanted me to get held back so that, one of them, it's been so many years, I believe it was my mom wanted me to be held back so that I would be closer in age to the students, which basically made me start to suffer. And I started to not care about schooling as much, and basically did whatever I did to just coast by. So I ended up repeating the 5th grade. This would also be around the time where I was diagnosed with ADHD, a couple of years leading into this. And whenever there was a problem in school, the doctors that I was sent to would always point to ADHD as the cause of it, and then they would constantly give me new medications and up those doses, or put me on new experimental medications, or even medications for the side effects of other medications, and that really started to impact my mood, my appetite, and my health. I started to have delayed spine growth and a lot of other crazy symptoms of some of these pills. Some of them caused me to hallucinate, some of them caused me to sleepwalk, some caused me to wet the bed. And eventually, all these health problems would culminate in middle school, when my parents would move away again. One of them would move to San Jose and gain full custody of us at this point, me and my siblings. I would attend middle school, and then my mom, against the doctor's wishes, because she was starting to get concerned about my health, started to slowly wean me off my medications. And I actually started to get I started to get rapid growth spurts and started to really come into my own at this point. Middle school is a sore subject, and I don't like to talk about it all that much. This is when I started to encounter a lot of bullying, because it's a 5 through 8 middle school, and I'm joining partially into the 6th grade year at this point, because they started earlier than the school district that I came from. So I basically started about a month after the semester started, as the new kid with no friends. Eventually, this made me a target for bullying, but there are a lot of highlights I do want to highlight from my middle school education. This was a mostly Asian and Latino middle school, and the counseling and administrative staff were really nice to me. I got put into a lot of counseling programs to help me make friends, to help me handle my anger management, and even giving me some support programs that actually helped me get back in the swing of things in classes. It actually greatly improved me, and I even managed to get in onto the honor roll by the end of my 7th grade year. Eventually, the bullying would hit a peak towards the end of 7th grade, because apparently excelling and doing well only made me more of a target for bullies. which eventually culminated in me getting jumped after school, and a lot of people getting suspended or expelled after that. There was even a crazy incident. I don't even know if I want to put this on the internet or out there, but there was an incident where I eventually lashed out and during a substitute teacher's stint where I ended up throwing a desk at one of my bullies, and apparently the administration swept that under the rug, and they just let me get away with that. Because I guess a lot of people stood up for me behind the scenes that know that I was being provoked and finally snapped. I always like to look back at this as a moment where I think the education system really helped me out, or particularly the teachers, administrators, and educators really improved my standing. And if it wasn't for a lot of what the education system did for me, I might have never gotten to the high school from this point on. But my high school career was also a little bit odd. Went to Westmont High School, and I was there until my senior year, where I would also be attending the Silicon Valley Career Technical Education, which was called CCOC. It was the Campbell Community Occupational Center back then. And this was in 2011. And during this time, I would drop out of Westmont High School and enter the CASE program. Now, the CASE program is the Campbell Adult Community Education, and it is a GED program. I basically dropped out my senior year and got put into a GED program. However, an educator did reach out to me. Someone who was renting a room out of our place at my mom's place, Chris Hodgkins, who is a counselor for Boynton High School. He lives in Maine now. I still keep in contact with him. He's a really nice guy. He's getting up there in age, and I hope he's doing well. But he managed to get me into Boynton High School, which is a continuation school. He managed to get me into there, and I actually ended up getting my high school diploma after all, getting pulled out of the GED program. I didn't really like the way that the GED program worked, because it was literally just all solid banking method. They literally were just giving us textbooks to fill out. They basically gave us you would basically get units from courses you were missing or whatever in high school by filling out workbook after workbook after workbook. And if you filled out like an entire workbook from beginning to end in like a 2 or 3 week period, you basically got one class's worth of units. And it was aggravating. I hated it, and I wanted to get out of there. And I was really thankful to Mr. Hodgkins for putting me through the Boynton High School program, where I did eventually graduate from there as a valedictorian, because one of my favorite things about them is that they didn't do homework. Everything was always in-class assignments, and almost everything was done through a rapport or evaluation with teachers. These were small classes of about less than 20 kids, and I really enjoyed my time there, and it really cemented that I wanted to be a teacher when I grew up, and I wanted to be a teacher at a school like that where I could help those kids maybe turn their lives around like my life had been turned around. From there, I went on to West Valley Community College, where I would proceed to transfer to San Jose State University, which leads us to today. So I've gotten to see what college looks like at higher education at both the community and state level. Personally, I actually liked it better how it was done at the the community college level over the state level. It's a lot cheaper, and I feel like there's some problems with the current political systems that prevent accreditation and allowing them for giving out bachelor's degrees. If I could get a bachelor's degree at West Valley Community College, I would have gotten it. But because I can't get it there, I got put into the SSTP program here at San Jose State University. That's where we are today. Last little section here. What would I change about United States education? So, this is what I decided to come up with for what I think would be an ideal educational system for the U.S. And it's mostly a bunch of reforms, because unlike in apocalyptic education, I do believe that the current education system can be saved. I don't think it needs to be destroyed. It just needs to be reformed. It needs some financial reform so we could socialize education. If we make it so that it's no longer tied to property tax, we can make it so that education could be funded both in part from the government and in part from the taxpayer directly, which could allow for more socialized education. People would be getting taxed more, but it would also make it so that the cost of education would be cheaper and people would have more access to it. A good example is like the German education model where like higher education is free. Classroom reform I talk about a little bit. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I do think that the abolishing of homework, and there are several studies to support the idea that homework actually does not actually improve students' abilities to learn all that much. It's better to have in-class activities that help establish rapport, activities that include teacher involvement, activities that are more cooperative in nature, like group work. And I feel like to accommodate that, maybe we should have longer class days. A lot of the K through 12 is like a 6-hour class day. I think we could do a full 8 hours of student time where the students are out of the house. And that should probably be something we should be considering. If we had longer class times, we would be able to adjust curriculum, and we could be able to fit more curriculum into a school year. And then also on top of that, we could probably increase the number of days a year that we're going to school. I believe the average in the US right now is 180, and I think we could get that up to 200. So, we already hinted at it. I do think that curriculum reform is a good idea. We should have more flexible curriculums that include diversity, equity, inclusion. We should have curriculums that can cater to a career path. We could make it so that, similar to how it's operated at the college level, where you meet with a counselor and then you can decide your career path, and we divide curriculum up based off of career paths. For instance, if we're like in the history department, you could have a career in history. You could take courses that curriculum to adjust for that. And then we still have a general education curriculum program that we could follow where there's at least a base amount of stuff that everyone's getting a hold of. And then lastly, this is something that came up in my Sociology of Education course, which was the idea of evaluation reform or getting rid of the grading system. Specifically the like 1 to 4 scale or the evaluation system of letter grades. I think we have evolved past them as a society at this point, and I think it's time to remove them and replace them with something better. If we have longer school years, if we have longer class times, if we have more time for teachers to interact with students, we could replace grading with evaluation reform. I feel like a pass-fail system, which some colleges and some courses in high schools do offer today, a pass-fail system where it's like, did you comprehend and understand the curriculum material? Yes, you pass. No? Try again. But in order for this kind of a reform to work, you would actually need to make it so that it's time for the teachers or the counselors to do one-on-one with the students. You could do this through testing as well, through like essay testing, or like having them write in class every day a little reflection thing about what they learned and how they connected with it. There's so many different ways that you could accomplish this. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming. I'm sorry if I rambled on there for a little bit too long. But this has been my educational autoethnography. I'll see you all when I see you. Stay safe out there.